From convicts who claimed they would unalive again to those who were caught after years on the run, here are 20 defendants who were found guilty of their crimes and sentenced to the worst punishment imaginable. Number 20. Linda Anita Carty. In May 2001, Linda Carty's husband told her he was leaving her. She pleaded with him to stay, but he was unmoved. She then revealed that she was pregnant, and while her husband did not believe her at first, he decided he had to stay in the marriage for the baby. But Linda was not actually pregnant. This was all a plot to keep her husband. However, she knew that there would come a day when her husband would figure it all out. While the two of them tried to work through their separation, Linda informed a neighbor that she was due to give birth the next day. The neighbor later informed police that there was a baby seat in the back of the car, but that Linda did not appear pregnant at all. On May 16th, the day Linda claimed she was due to give birth, a 20-year-old woman was abducted from her home with her newborn. Investigators traced the crime back to 3 people, one of whom was Linda. CCTV footage captured the 3 of them in 2 vehicles around the area of the crime. Linda claimed she was being framed. She had formerly worked as a police informant and led to 2 substance busts, but was relieved of her duties when she started selling illegal substances again. Linda claimed that she was not responsible for the unaliving of the 20-year-old woman and the abduction of her newborn son, but she was arrested and charged with the crime. At her 2002 proceeding, Linda was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to capital punishment. She tried to appeal the case, claiming that it was a setup and that she had no intention of harming anyone to keep up her lie to her husband. Linda claimed it was all a coincidence. Many appeals were filed, but they were all rejected. The court found Linda guilty, and as of 2002, she is on unaliving row in Texas. Number 19. Heather Leavell Keaton, Corinne Heathcock, and John Joseph DeBlas met sometime after high school, got married, and had 2 children. Natalie, born in 2005, and Chase, born in 2006. The couple had a difficult marriage and eventually separated, with John gaining custody of both children. Sometime later, John met Heather, a visually impaired scholarship holder who seemed to love his kids like her own. The two entered a common-law marriage and began to live together as a family of 4. If you had asked anyone to describe the couple, they would claim they were loving and caring towards Natalie and Chase, and no one could have suspected what happened next. Something changed between 2009 and 2010. Friends and family members claimed that they witnessed the couple, especially Heather, treating the kids harshly. It was later revealed that John had permitted Heather to punish the kids however she felt fit. She decided it was best to bind and gag the kids, lock them in closets, and eventually decided to unalive them once and for all by poisoning them with antifreeze. The couple then quietly moved from Alabama to Kentucky after unaliving both kids. Eventually, after no one had seen or heard from the family in months, they filed a police report. John and Heather were arrested, and they admitted to the crimes, leading police to the children's bodies. John claimed that his involvement in the crime was mercy unaliving. He stated that Heather's punishments had gotten so severe that he believed the children were better off if they were unalived. Heather's case was different. The judge and jury believed that she had intentionally unalived the kids because she wanted to start a new life with John with her own children. The judge and jury were horrified at the details of the crime and decided that both of them deserved the ultimate punishment, capital punishment. Number 18. Robert Gregory Bowers. On October 27, 2018, a quiet Saturday morning in Pittsburgh was shattered by one of the worst attacks on a place of worship in United States history. Inside the Tree of Life synagogue, members of the Jewish community had gathered for Shabbat services. Among them were elderly worshippers, longtime members, and people who had shown up simply to pray. Within minutes, that space turned into a scene of chaos. The man responsible was Robert Gregory Bowers. Armed and prepared, he entered the synagogue and opened fire on the people inside. 11 individuals were unalived that morning, and several others, including responding police officers, were injured. It was not random. Investigators quickly determined that the attack was driven by deeply rooted hatred toward the Jewish community. In the hours and days that followed, details emerged that showed this was something he had been building toward for a long time. When law enforcement arrived, Bowers was still inside the building. There was an exchange of gunfire before he was eventually taken into custody. Even after his arrest, the case against him was overwhelming. The trial that followed became one of the most closely watched federal cases in recent years. Prosecutors pursued the capital penalty, arguing that the scale of the attack and the intent behind it made it one of the most severe crimes imaginable. Bauer's defense team did not deny that he carried out the attack. Instead, they focused on his mental state, attempting to avoid a death sentence. But the jury ultimately rejected that argument. In 2023, after hearing all the evidence, they found him guilty on all counts and recommended capital punishment. The judge formally sentenced Robert Gregory Bowers to capital punishment. Number 17. Ronald Gray. Ronald Gray's crimes date all the way back to the 1980s. While serving in the United States military, stationed at Fort Bragg, Ronald began abducting and harming women. He would then unalive them and dismember their bodies. Altogether, Ronald had unalived 4 women, 3 civilians and 1 private, and attempted to unalive another private. In all of these cases, there was more than enough evidence to charge him as a suspect. His possessions were found at the crime scene, his footprints and his fingerprints were found on the scene. However, it took investigators longer than necessary to trace it back to Ronald, a military man. Eventually, after the woman who had survived the attack identified him, he was arrested and charged with the crimes. His crime span lasted for a little less than a year, between 1986 through 1987, but it was considered one of the worst spree unalivings in Fort Bragg's history. Ronald was tried in 2 separate cases, one in civilian court and one in military court. A civilian court sentenced him to consecutive life terms, but the military court sentenced him to capital punishment. As of 1987, Ronald remains on lethal row. He has filed several appeals, claiming that he had suffered harm from his stepfather growing up and that it contributed to his altered mental state. However, court-appointed psychologists later testified that all of Ronald's crimes were premeditated and that he was sane at the time that he kidnapped, harmed, and later unalived all the women. Number 16. Wesley Devon Harris, Rutledge, Alabama, has a population of roughly 350. Everyone knows everyone. In 2000, 20-year-old Wesley started a relationship with 14-year-old Janice Ball. Janice's family disapproved of the relationship and were unhappy when she gave birth to the couple's daughter. They were enraged when they learned that, despite their efforts, Janice and Wesley had remained in contact, and she was pregnant again in 2002. Janice told investigators that her family eventually accepted the couple being together, but that she had been the one who wanted to leave Wesley. She claimed that after her father bought the couple a trailer to live out of as a family, Wesley started getting domestically violent toward her. Eventually, in 2002, she separated from him and told him that she would be filing charges against him. This angered Wesley, who believed that Janice's family had set her up to testify against him. In August, he traveled to the Ball family's farm in Rutledge and tied up Janice as she slept. One by one, he began unaliving Janice's family as they returned to the family farm. Altogether, 6 members of the Ball family were unalived before Wesley took Janice and their daughter and fled the farm. 0-40-47. The jury recommended life in prison for Wesley, but the judge overrode their decision. He claimed that Wesley's crimes were far worse than what the jury previewed. He deserved capital punishment. Number 15. Jeremy Bryan Jones. Jeremy Bryan Jones didn't just commit one crime. By the time he was finally caught in 2004, investigators believed they were dealing with something much bigger. Jones had a long history of violent behavior, even before the case that would ultimately seal his fate. He moved frequently, worked low-paying jobs, and used aliases to avoid being tracked. At one point, he was even living under a completely different identity. Everything came to a head in September 2004. Jones had been staying with a group of people, helping with repair work. That's when he targeted a 45-year-old woman named Lisa Nichols. According to investigators, Jones broke into her home, held her at gunpoint, and assaulted her before shooting her multiple times. After that, he attempted to cover up the crime by setting her body on fire. Fingerprints on a beer can placed him at the scene. Ballistics tied the weapon back to him, and eventually, he admitted responsibility, though even then, his story kept changing. But after his arrest, Jones began confessing to multiple other unalivings across several states. He claimed responsibility for as many as 20 additional victims, describing crimes that spanned over a decade. However, many of these confessions were later questioned. In 2005, Jones stood trial for the murder of Lisa. His defense team attempted to argue that he was mentally impaired and under the influence at the time of the crime. On December 1st, 2005, Jones was sentenced to capital punishment. Number 14. Jeffrey Lee. You know about Elvis Presley, but have you ever heard of Orion? The American singer's real name was James Hodges Ellis, and his career started in the 1960s. It bloomed around the 1970s after Elvis passed away. Record companies would use Orion's likeness to Elvis to further the rumor that the singer had not actually passed away. This was when Orion's career was doing well, but he resented the fact that he would have to wear a mask during his performances. Eventually, James retired from singing and started operating a store, Jimmy's Pawn Shop, with Elaine Thompson. In 1998, a man named Jeffrey Lee attempted to rob the store, shooting and unaliving James and Elaine. He also shot a third person, an employee at the store, but she survived her injuries. In court, Jeffrey pleaded guilty to all charges. While the jury recommended a life sentence behind bars, the judge believed Jeffrey was a violent offender. He overrode the jury's decision and sentenced Jeffrey to capital punishment. Number 13. Courtney Lockhart. Courtney Lockhart's defense team argued that he had been suffering from a psychotic break after being dishonorably discharged from the US military. In 2008, he began committing a string of attacks against women that lasted for a month and ended with the unaliving of Lauren Burke. Lauren was an 18-year-old student at Auburn University who was kidnapped by Courtney in March. According to investigators, Courtney robbed her and then drove around the city with her, lamenting about his misfortunes and expected her to sympathize with her. When Lauren tried to escape, he shot and unalived her, leaving her body in the middle of a road. A day later, police found her body and also a stolen vehicle that had been burned by Courtney as he tried to escape. They eventually cornered him after a high-speed chase, and he was found in possession of Lauren's missing iPod. The trial long, Courtney's defense team argued that their client was frustrated with his misfortunes and that he had shot Lauren accidentally when she attempted to leap out of the moving vehicle. However, prosecutors later claimed that Courtney was part of a long string of violent crimes, such as threatening, robbing, and carjacking across the area. The jury recommended maximum confinement, but the judge believed Courtney needed to be executed. Number 12. Devin Moore. Devin Moore has no regrets for his crime. The 18-year-old smiled in his mugshot after he was convicted of unaliving 3 law enforcement members. In July of 2003, Devin was arrested on suspicion of driving a stolen vehicle. In the early morning hours, the 18-year-old was taken to a booking office where he was fingerprinted and his mugshot was taken. During this time, police received information about more crimes that he had committed. While uncuffed, Devin managed to grab an officer's weapon, shot him several times, and then shot another officer in the hallway. He then made his way to the communications room where he unalived a dispatcher. After committing the unalivings, Devin then stole a police vehicle and began driving recklessly around the city. He was eventually apprehended and admitted to the crimes. Devin's defense was that he was being treated harshly by the arresting officer and that he had no intention of shooting him. When the officer told Devin that he would face up to 3 years in prison for stealing, something that would derail his plans to join the military, he panicked and shot him. He then shot and unalived the other 2 men after they had heard gunshots. He also claimed that he did not attack anyone else at the station because he believed that no one else was a real threat to him. The case was sensational for one major reason. Besides the severity of the crimes Devin had committed, it was the fact that his defense team argued he was inspired to commit the crimes because of his overdependence on the video game, Grand Theft Auto. His lawyers claimed that Devin was an impressionable youth who did not know any better, and that he had acted on impulse from what he had seen in the video game. The judge and jury rejected his plea, recommending maximum punishment for his crimes. Number 11. Ryan Clark Peterson. In 2012, a 22-year-old Ryan entered a Wicksburg nightclub armed with semi-automatic weapons and began shooting indiscriminately at the crowd. Earlier that evening, Ryan was asked to leave the nightclub after he began acting unruly with one of the dancers. Instead of going home, he went to his car, retrieved a pistol, and started attacking people at the club. In court, he denied any culpability for his actions and stated that he was acting in anger because of how unfairly the club's security guards had treated him. The defense also pointed out that Ryan came from a dysfunctional family. had a familial history of mental problems, and that he felt isolated by those around him. He finally snapped in 2012 and was not guilty by reason of insanity. However, the prosecution argued that Ryan planned the unaliving. He went back to his car and grabbed his weapon when he could have just as easily gone back home. The trial was delayed for some time because of the defense's motion for competency trials. Eventually, the court found him fit to stand trial and sentenced him to ultimate punishment. Number 10. Christy Michelle Scott. Officers responded to the scene of a burning home in Russellville, Alabama. The home was shared between Christy and her 7-year-old autistic son, Mason Scott, and Christy's husband. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Christy alive and well, but Mason had passed away in the fire. Christy's husband was at work at the time of the incident. Christy was charged as a suspect almost immediately. Investigators found out that less than 12 hours earlier, Christy had taken out a $100,000 life insurance policy on her son. It was an open and shut case, but Christy still denied any involvement in her son's unaliving. Family and friends later testified on both ends. Some portrayed Christy as a loving mother, and others revealed that she had started growing resentment against Mason and his increasing needs as a child with autism. Investigators also unraveled Christy's long-standing history with arson. She had previously been charged for setting fires at her father's and grandmother's homes. They also found a fully working smoke detector that had been removed from the home, and an autopsy report confirmed that Mason had consumed an unhealthy amount of cough syrup before passing away in the fire. The judge called it one of the worst cases they had ever seen, arguing that Christy was a selfish woman who deserved capital punishment for her crimes. Number 9. Samantha Allen Aim Deal was one of 3 children born to Shirley and David Deal. After moving in with David's family, Shirley claimed that she was treated like a slave, tortured, and forced to move out and relocate. Shirley claimed that she did not take her children with her when she moved because David and his family never harmed the kids. But this eventually changed, and prosecutors argued that the family started using Ame as a scapegoat. Neighbors claimed to have seen Ame being unfairly and severely punished by the family. The family would also move whenever investigators started investigating the home for cases of neglect. Ame and her siblings were even homeschooled after school. Authorities raised concerns over the children's health and wellness. David eventually moved away with his younger 2 children, leaving Aim with his mother and Cynthia Saltzman, who legally adopted Aim. In 2011, police arrived at the home to find that Ame had been unalived due to the horrific torture inflicted on her by her grandmother, Judith, Cynthia, and Cynthia's daughter and son-in-law, Samantha and John. The family initially denied any involvement, claiming that Aim had been playing a game of hide-and-seek and snuck into the footlocker where her body was found. Investigators later revealed that the footlocker was only 3 feet tall, and that the 4-foot, 10-year-old would have to be squeezed into it by force. That was when Samantha admitted that she had locked Ame inside as punishment for stealing a popsicle. The horrific details of the case shocked everyone involved. The judge argued that no one in Ame's life had stepped up to protect her. Samantha and John were sentenced to lethal punishment. Judith and Christine were sentenced to life in prison, and David was also sentenced to a prison term for failing to protect his daughter. Number 8. Cleophas Cooksey Jr. In late 2017, over the span of just 3 weeks, the city of Phoenix, Arizona, was dealing with something that didn't make sense at first. Victims were being found across different locations, different backgrounds, different circumstances. But one thing connected them all: they had all been shot. At the center of it all was Cleophas Cooksey Jr. Between November and December of that year, Cooksey carried out a series of shootings that left at least 8 people unalived. 2 of those victims were his own mother and stepfather. Everything came to an end on December 17, 2017. Police responded to a call at his mother's apartment. When they arrived, they found both his mother and stepfather unalived inside. Cooksey was still there. Authorities were able to connect him to the earlier shootings across the Phoenix area. The jury found him guilty on multiple counts, including first-degree unaliving. When it came to sentencing, Cooksey was given capital punishment for 6 of the unaliving. As of now, he remains on unaliving row. Number 7. Preston Strong. The La Mesa Street unalivings was a cold case from 2005, where a family of 6 to 4 children and 2 adults were found unalived in their home. With no suspects or leads, the case went cold until 2007, when police matched Preston Strong's fingerprints from another crime, the unaliving of Dr. Satinder Gill, to the La Mesa Street unalivings. Satinder Gill was unalived on November 2nd after a friend claimed that she had her suspicions when the doctor called and asked her to take out $24,000 in cash in exchange for $100. When the friend arrived at Satinder's home, the doctor would only open the door halfway to retrieve the money before closing it again. A day later, police found Satinder's body. They eventually traced the crime back to Preston, who then tried to use that money. During interrogations, they also linked him to the La Mesa unalivings and believed it was motivated by the patriarch of the family, refusing to help out Preston with money. The case was swift, with the judge recommending a capital penalty for Preston's senseless crimes. Number 6. Randy Gay. By the time Randy Gay was arrested and charged with the unaliving of Connie Ann Snow, he had already unalived 2 people, his father-in-law and father, and had been charged, sentenced, and later released for both unalivings. The third time, however, was different. Friends and family members claimed that Randy came from an awful upbringing and that his father was violent toward him. They also claimed that Randy turned to drinking at an early age because of the situation at home. In 1978, Randy got into an argument with his father-in-law, James Kelly, retrieved a shotgun, and unalived him. In court, he claimed self-defense and argued that James had threatened to unalive him first. Randy was sentenced to 10 years with 5 years on probation, but was released on parole in 9 months. He was rearrested for violating his parole, but ultimately only spent 2 years in prison for the unaliving. Randy eventually remarried 2 more times. In 1991, he had an argument with his father while he was camping with him and his wife. Randy's wife claimed that she heard gunshots from the site where he had been fishing with his father and found Glenn Gay unalived with a single gunshot wound to the head. The couple eventually turned themselves in, and Janice Gay revealed the truth about what happened. This time, Randy was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but was released on parole in 2000. His luck ran out in 2011 when he got into a confrontation with Caroline after she attempted to steal his vehicle. He claimed that he got angry and shot her, even as she was attempting to leave. Randy then loaded her body in his truck before dumping it. This time, the defense argued that Randy had taken on the role of a serial unaliver and should not be treated with any leniency. Randy's arguments of being raised in a violent home did not hold true at this point because he had already unalived Glenn almost 20 years prior to the third unaliving. The judge agreed and sentenced Randy to capital punishment. Number 5. Luis Bracamontes. In 1997 and 2001, Mexican immigrant Luis Bracamontes was arrested and deported to his home state after committing a series of crimes in the United States. However, he managed to illegally enter the United States for a third time in 2014. His first 2 offenses were related to the use and sale of illegal substances, but in 2014, he sealed his fate when he unalived 2 police officers and attempted to unalive a civilian. That day, Luis and a female accomplice, a citizen of the US, shot and unalived a sheriff's deputy before they attempted to unsuccessfully carjack a vehicle. They shot the driver of the vehicle, but he survived his injuries. The duo then shot and unalived a police officer and gravely injured another. After an extensive manhunt, Luis and his accomplice were arrested. The case was delayed for several years because of Luis's antics in court. He would repeatedly yell out and talk over the prosecution. People remarked that his behavior seemed bizarre. Luis would laugh and threaten other members in the courtroom, and he even claimed that he would go ahead and do it all over again if he could. His accomplice received a 50-year prison term, but the judge believed Luis deserved much worse. He was ultimately sentenced to capital punishment. Because of Luis's illegal status in the United States, the case sparked mass debate on immigration policies. In fact, U.S. President Donald Trump even used Luis as an example of tightening the country's immigration policies. Number 4. Michael Gargiulo. Michael Gargiulo wasn't caught after one crime. His case stretched across years, multiple states, and multiple victims, with a pattern that only became clear once investigators started connecting the dots. Gargiulo's first known link to violence goes back to 1993, when he allegedly unalived an 18-year-old neighbor, Tricia Pacaccio, outside her home in Illinois. The case remained unsolved for years, with no clear suspect at the time. After moving to California in the late 1990s, the pattern continued. In 2001, Gargiulo entered the home of 22-year-old Ashley Ellerin in Los Angeles and stabbed her dozens of times. She had been preparing to go out that night, but never made it. The case drew attention, but again, there was no immediate arrest. In 2005, another woman, Maria Bruno, Gargiulo entered the home of 22-year-old Ashley Ellerin in Los Angeles and stabbed her dozens of times. She had been preparing to go out that night, but never made it. The case drew attention, but again, there was no immediate arrest. In 2005, another woman, Maria Bruno, was found unalived in her apartment. She had been stabbed multiple times while asleep. Investigators began to notice similarities between the cases, but they still lacked the evidence needed to tie everything together. That changed in 2008. Gargiulo broke into the home of Michelle Murphy and attempted to unalive her. This time, the outcome was different. She fought back. During the struggle, Gargiulo injured himself, leaving behind DNA at the scene. He was arrested in June 2008. In 2019, the jury found him guilty of multiple charges, including first-degree murder and attempted murder. In 2021, he was formally sentenced to capital punishment. Number 3. Charles Chase Merritt. On February 4, 2010, a family of 4 in Fallbrook, California, suddenly disappeared. Joseph McStay, his wife Summer McStay, and their 2 young sons were gone without a trace. Their home was left behind with food still inside, their dogs outside, and no clear sign of what had happened. Early on, investigators believed the family may have left voluntarily, especially after their vehicle was found near the US-Mexico border. For years, there were no clear answers. The case went cold, with only speculation about where the family had gone and why. Then, in November 2013, a motorcyclist discovered human remains in the desert near Victorville, California. Investigators later confirmed the bodies belonged to the McStay family. They had been unalived and buried in shallow graves. Autopsies showed they passed from blunt force trauma, likely caused by a heavy object such as a sledgehammer. Attention quickly turned to someone close to the family, Chase. He was Joseph McStay's business partner and one of the last known people to have contact with him before the family disappeared. Records later showed that after the family went missing, Chase wrote multiple checks to himself from Joseph's business account. In 2014, Chase was arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree unaliving. Prosecutors argued that the motive was financial. They claimed he was in debt and used the situation to take control of the business funds. Prosecutors presented a timeline placing Chase with Joseph shortly before the disappearance. They also introduced DNA evidence found in the family's vehicle, along with financial records showing unauthorized transactions after the family vanished. The defense argued that the case was circumstantial and that there was no direct evidence placing Chase at the burial site or during the unalivings. The jury disagreed. In June 2019, Chase was found guilty on all 4 counts. During the penalty phase, the jury recommended capital punishment, and in January 2020, he was formally sentenced to be unalived. Number 2. Shauna Ford. On May 30th, 2009, a home in Arivaca, Arizona, became the center of a planned attack that quickly turned violent. Inside the house were Raul Flores, his wife, and their 9-year-old daughter, Brisenia Flores. Along with 2 accomplices, Shauna planned a home invasion with the intention of stealing money. Prosecutors later stated that the goal was to use whatever they found to fund her vigilante group, Minutemen American Defense. The group gained entry by pretending to be officials searching for fugitives. Once inside, the situation escalated quickly. Raul Flores was shot and unalived. His wife was also shot multiple times but survived by pretending to pass out. Brisenia was also shot and unalived inside the home. The attackers then left the scene, taking small valuables with them after failing to find the money they expected. As the investigation unfolded, evidence pointed directly to Shauna as the person who planned and organized the entire operation. Even though she was not the one who pulled the trigger, prosecutors argued that she was fully responsible for what happened because she orchestrated the crime. In 2011, Shauna was found guilty on multiple counts, including first-degree murder, attempted murder, and armed robbery. Shauna was given capital punishment. Number 1. Daniel Wozniak. On May 21st, Daniel Wozniak, a local theater actor, targeted his neighbor and friend, Samuel Herr. Samuel had recently told him about savings from his military service, money Wozniak wanted. That same day, Daniel took her to a theater and shot him. To cover it up, he used Samuel's phone to contact Yuri Kibuishi, a college student who knew Hare. He lured her to the apartment, where he shot and unalived her as well. Daniel then staged the scene to make it look like Samuel had committed the crime and fled. That same night, after carrying out both unalivings, he went on stage and performed in a local theater production, acting as if nothing had happened. The plan didn't hold for long. Investigators became suspicious when a teenager revealed that Daniel had asked him to withdraw money from Samuel's account. He was arrested on May 26, just days before his wedding. After initially denying involvement, Daniel eventually confessed and led authorities to the remains, which he had dismembered and disposed of in different locations. In 2016, Daniel was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree unaliving. Shortly after, the jury recommended the capital penalty. He was formally sentenced in September 2016.